Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earlier crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. So today I am using this My Favorite Things stamp set. It is the Hang Out and Celebrate stamp set. I love sloths. I think they are oddly cute. And I will be coloring the sloth laying on the packet, the pile of presents down there at the bottom. I've also pulled out my wonky stitched rectangles dies, and I have some pieces of pattern paper from this Echo Park Magical Birthday pattern paper pad. I will be coloring with Prismacolor pencils, and I store my pencils in this awesome little zipper pouch. I am going to stamp the sloth with Simon Says Stamp ink, but I will leave the stamp in the MISTI so that when I'm done coloring, I can go back over and stamp over it because the wax in the pencils does kind of blur out or fade back those black stamp lines. Color pencil coloring. You can use as many colors as you need to get the shading and look that you want, but you will always use multiple layers. I think most of the time on this card, I used at least 2, if not 3 layers of each color, no matter how small, except for the polka dots maybe. And when I'm done, we're going to add a little bit of shimmer and stuff with some stickles. So now that we've talked about the crime, let's go ahead and jump on into the crime. That was backwards. Now that we talked about the coloring, let's jump into the crime. There we go. Okay. Our alphabetical journey today is taking us back to the state of New York. So the area that became New York was once home to 2 very powerful indigenous tribes, and they were there long before European explorers even landed. The first European explorer that landed in the New York area was probably Giovanni de Veronzo. He was an Italian explorer sailing under the French flag, and he reached the area sometime around 1524. Then Henry Hudson, an Englishman sailing for the Dutch, sailed up the Hudson River in 1609, and that granted the Netherlands right to the territory of like New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and part of Connecticut. The Dutch actually called it New Netherland. And then in 1609, about the same time, the French explorer Samuel de Champlain entered the northern part of New York and claimed that part for France. However, not to be undone, in 1664, King Charles II of England granted his brother James, the Duke of York, a charter for the New Netherland area. So he sent a fleet of warships over to take over the area, and really, there was no opposition. The ships arrived in today's New York Harbor. The New Amsterdam governor, Peter can't say his name, Stuyvesant, something like that, surrendered with no fight. And the English renamed the area New York after the Duke of York, who would later become King James II of England. So New York established its first independent government in 1776, and on February 6 of 1778, New York approved the Articles of Confederation, and in ratifying the United States Constitution on July 26, 1788, New York became the 11th state in the United States of America. Now, New York was the first state in the Union to require cars to have license plates, and the area called Thousand Islands actually has 1,864 islands. Potato chips were developed in Saratoga, New York, and New York was home to America's first pizzeria in 1905. 40 million gallons of water fall over Niagara Falls each minute. Pinball was illegal in New York until 1975. There are no Walmarts in Manhattan, but the largest Walmart in the United States is in Albany. The Empire State Building has its own zip code, and New York is home of one of the literary world's oldest mystery tropes, the locked room mystery. So before we talk about the who, let's talk about the what. A locked room mystery is probably most notable due to the works of Edgar Allan Poe and stories about Sherlock Holmes. A locked room mystery is a mystery that appears to have no possible answer. The preface is, the murder victim is found in a locked room with no one able to enter from the outside and no evidence that the death was self-inflicted. So now let's meet our who's. We're going to meet Isidore Fink. Isidore was born on November 13th in 1883 to Herz, H-E-R-Z, and Sarah Fink in Poland. But this part of Poland is actually now part of Germany. But his birth record says Poland. I like triple checked. He was the youngest of their 3 children and their only son. Bertha Klebe, was born on the 15th of June in 1889 in Wreda, W-E-H-R-D-A, Werda, Germany, and was the oldest of the 2 daughters of Suckle and Mina Klebe. And somewhere along the lines, and it's really funny because you would think more would be written about these people because this is such an interesting story. But all I could find was that somewhere Isidore and Bertha met, and they were married on August 20th, 1912 in Werda, W-E-H-R-D-A, Germany, where Bertha was born. And the couple also immigrated to the United States in New York at some point. I couldn't find their immigration date, and I didn't go look at immigration records. I didn't. But they settled in New York City, and they opened a laundry business on 5th Avenue, and they lived on 4th and 132nd, so just down the street a little bit. Now, Isidore was known to be a hard worker, and on Saturdays, he kept his laundry open late, like late. But the neighborhood wasn't great, and the crime rate was going up as rapidly as the economy was going down. The laundry was actually located on the ground floor of a building and had a door that opened to the outside. Now, while Isidore had friends and was well-liked, he was also known as being a recluse. He just was not, he was probably what we'd now call an introvert, but he was also an immigrant in a country, immigrating from a country that was poor to a country where he was hoping to have a better life, and he probably did, but it wasn't great because it's, the 1920s, let's face it. So anyway, Isidore, while he kept his laundry open late on Saturdays, he kept the doors locked and bolted from the inside, and his windows had bars on them and were locked on the inside. And he only opened the door for customers, like people that he knew, at night. During the day, I imagine that was probably different, but it was noted that at night, after dark, his shop was locked up tight as a drum, and he only opened the door for people he knew. So on March 12th, 1929, at about 10:30 p.m., a woman who lived in the apartment that was situated behind the laundry. So I couldn't find a picture of the area, but I found generalized pictures of the area in 1929. And I think probably her apartment building wasn't attached to the building that the laundry was in, but was like only an alley separated her building and the laundry building. So anyways, this woman who lived in the building behind the laundry thought she heard a fight. And not only did she thought she heard shouting and yelling coming from the laundry at 10:30 at night on a Saturday, she thought she heard like a physical fight, like shouts and fisticuffs or, somebody being beaten up. So she summoned the police. I am assuming in 1929, she probably sent a child or a neighbor running down the corner. It didn't say how she got the police. I don't know. Maybe in 1929, there was a phone in the building she could access. I don't know. It didn't say, but she called for the police. Now, police response came in the form of Patrolman Albert Kattenborn. Albert was described as a large, bulky man, and when he arrived at the laundry and knocked on the door, there was no answer. Nobody answered. So he tried to, open the door, and the door would not budge. And Albert looked in the windows, and what he saw was that Isidore was lying on the floor. But there was no way into the laundry. The only thing that Patrolman Kattenborn saw was that there was a small transom window above the door to the laundry. However, it was so small that this burly patrolman could not fit through it. He was not going through this door. So the patrolman and I'm assuming the neighbor, maybe it was one of her children, the patrolman found a small boy and hoisted him up over the door, down through the transom window, and the boy landed on the floor and opened the door to the laundry. It was noted that one of the hinges on this transom door or transom window rather, was broken, or, so that the door kind of flopped open instead of angled properly as it should have. But this window was so small that only a child could go through it. Anyway, when the child was lowered through the window and he unbolted the door, the patrolman was able to come in, and then detectives later arrived as well. But one thing that Patrolman Kattenborn noticed was that the lock on this door was not your standard everyday lock. It was a 7-inch iron sliding bolt. And it was the type of bolt that you could not lock or unlock from the outside without a specific key, right? You couldn't just slide the bolt from the outside. It was a 7-inch long bolt. This door was locked from the inside. Okay. So anyway, Patrolman Kattenborn, and the detectives that arrived later noticed something very peculiar about this scene. So obviously the patrolman comes in and he goes to check on Isidore, and he finds that Isidore's dead. And he's dead in the back part of the room of the laundry. He has 2 bullet holes in the left side of his chest and 1 through his left hand. The odd thing was, it wasn't a robbery. There was money in Isidore's pocket. There was money in the cash register. Isidore's watch was still on his person. And the clothing iron that was being heated on the gas stove, like the gas stove was still on, the heating iron was still hot. And the strangest part of all was that there was a complete absence of a weapon. So because the room had been locked from the inside, the first theory was that this must be a self-inflicted wound, right? I mean, the door was super bolted from the inside. The windows to the street were locked and barred, but there was no weapon near the body. Like, it was not laying on the floor near Isidore. There was no gun there. So the detectives, they start looking around the laundry for some kind of device or method that would have removed the weapon away from Isidore when he dropped it. Like if he had hurt himself and then released the weapon, maybe it was tied to like a bungee cord from the ceiling or something, right? So they start looking around. They took up the floorboards. They looked under the rugs. They looked in the walls. They looked through all of the piles of laundry, both the ones that had been cleaned and the ones that were waiting to be cleaned. Nothing. There was no gun in the building. So obviously, the next obvious answer is that someone killed Isidore. They just had to figure out how, if the room was bolted from the inside, how somebody else could have killed Isidore. The first theory was, of course, the transom window, right? But the neighbor woman and Patrolman Kattenborn pointed out that the size of the child that they had to drop through this window was little. And there's no way an adult could fit through that window to get out. Broken hinge or not, this was not a window that an adult could fit through. So then the idea was that if an adult could not fit through the window to get out, maybe the assailant, using a step stool or a ladder of some kind, shot poor Isidore through the open window. Sounds logical and probable, and the most likely scenario, looking at the evidence, except that after examining the wounds on Isidore, that couldn't be it either, because Isidore had the telltale sign of an up-close and personal attack. There was a burn on the hand that was indicative of a close-range gunshot. And after measuring the distance of where Isidore fell compared to the window, and the angle of the window and all of that thing, the detectives determined that it was unlikely that he could have stood close enough to the door and been hit and killed while somebody was, it was improbable. It was improbable that he would not have run and hide while somebody was perching above the door to shoot him. There would have been time for him to move away, to hide behind something. Okay, it did not seem probable. So the detectives keep investigating. They talk to witnesses in the area. There was a friend of Isidore's that told the police that he kept the laundry open until midnight for regular customers, and that he himself had stopped by at about 9:45 the night of the murder. He also mentioned that when he left, there was another man and woman that had stopped by to see if Isidore had any unclaimed laundry for sale. Apparently, it was common at the time and for Isidore that if laundry was not picked up within a certain amount of time, that Isidore would sell the laundry off, and the people who bought it could then turn around and sell it for a profit. There was also a report that a couple of women were seen outside the laundry, like very well-dressed women were seen outside the laundry late the night of the murder. But everybody the detectives spoke to said that Isidore was not known with taking up women, other than his wife, obviously. And she actually was in Europe visiting her family when her husband was killed. So another theory that presented itself was that Isidore was shot in the hallway or I guess the street, because not a hallway, the street or in the doorway, and then managed to get inside the laundry, bolt himself in, and run to the back of the room for safety before succumbing to his wounds. The medical examiner ruled that possibility out because, in his opinion, the shots to his chest would certainly have killed him like almost instantly. Too quickly for him to have been shot, run in, slam the door, bolted the door, and moved far enough away to be safe, here's my air quotes you can't see, from whoever was trying to kill him. There have been a few cases since where victims of crimes and accidents have actually been noted to walk farther or stay alive longer than seems necessary based on their injuries. And that's kind of been attributed to like the adrenaline and the mind not realizing how badly you're injured, and adrenaline just trying to get you into a safe situation. But that was not known to the police in New York at the time. And it really seemed unlikely based on the 2 shots to his chest in the area of his heart. It did not seem likely to the medical examiner and the detectives and investigators that he would have had time or ability, and there was no blood trail. It wasn't like they saw blood in the doorway and it trickled back to where he fell and dropped. There was nothing. There was nothing. Another thing to note, there were no fingerprints in the laundry that didn't belong to Isidore or his wife, including on the bolt to the door. So clearly whatever happened, Isidore is the one who locked that bolt. I guess gloves. Gloves could be a thing, right? So the newspapers were printing all the possible theories of the crime. The New York Times heavily pushed the theory that the murderer shot Isidore through the transom window, despite the physical evidence proving the likelihood of that theory. Like, it is more likely that he was shot in an open doorway and locked himself in and died than him having been shot through that little transom window. But the newspaper just decided they were gonna call that the theory. But the newspapers were all printing whatever their favorite theory was. So in the end, the police gave up. They were like, we don't know. It's 1929. They don't have video surveillance. They don't have forensics. I mean, fingerprinting was still kind of the standard, but a new standard. They didn't have any particular eyewitnesses other than the woman who witnessed or heard the fight. And she did say she heard a fight and she called the police. She did not mention hearing gunshots, but she said she heard shouts and arguing and the signs of a fight, or the sounds of a fight. So maybe to her the sound of a fight was gunshots. I don't know. 2 years after Isidore's death, the New York police commissioner called Isidore's case, quote, an insoluble mystery, and declared the case a cold case. And here, okay, that was 1929. Here we are in 2024, so almost 100, like 95 years out, right? It's still never been solved. I did not find whether or not Bertha came back to the United States. In fact, let me look up her death place. Okay, so I paused for a minute and went back and checked my sources, and there's no death date or place listed for Bertha. Like, I am really surprised at how little information was gathered and published on Isidore and Bertha. Not that, I mean, there's no record of them having children, and not that they were anything but, you know, your regular American, you know, immigrant or immigrant to America. They were regular people, but there's just so little published about them, even considering that Isidore's murder is like the cream of the crop for mystery stories and mystery authors. This is the kind of story that both fascinates me and makes me sad. Like, there was nobody to fight for a conclusion to this story. There was nobody to push for a conclusion. And that makes me sad for Isidore. I did find a picture of Isidore. This was from his find-a-grave. I did not find a picture of Bertha. Not at all. The only other photograph I found in connection to the story was this photograph of the New York Times headline. So tell me what you think. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this quick story. I have a couple of other videos here that I think you will like. I've also added that subscribe button. If you have not subscribed, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below and tell me your thoughts on the locked room mystery. Give me a thumbs up if you like the story, and have a really fabulous day.